Welcome, everyone, to the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. This is one of our online candidate forums. We're tonight in the beautiful city of Suffolk, Virginia, for the Suffolk School Board candidate online forum. So we'll be talking with a great number of the school board candidates tonight, looking at their positions and determining if their positions are the types of positions that we need to support or not. I have with me Miss Mary Addison. How are you doing, Mary?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Glad to be here tonight.
Great, great. Mary is a consultant that works with the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. A little later, we're going to discuss what she does for the caucus. Right now, we're going to take a quick moment of silence, and we'd like for everyone to do a silent prayer for the great city of Suffolk.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we've hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we've watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won, is won.
All right. Excellent, excellent. Love for our country, love for our beautiful country. God bless America. I have with me Mary Addison, and now we're going to bring on the candidates for tonight. These candidates are running for Suffolk School Board in their various districts and boroughs. All right. So we're going to bring first to the stage Dr. Judith Brooks Buck, and we have Mr. Andy Hilton, and we also have Mr. Dave Bitnick. All right, so let's start with Dr. Brooks Buck. Why don't you take about 30 seconds and introduce yourselves?
I am Judith Brooks Buck. I have been the representative for the Nansford Borough since the borough was established about 7 years and 9 months ago. The borough was established after a redistricting effort in the city of Suffolk. And I am a retired professor from Virginia State University. Before that, I was chair of the education department at Hampton University. And before that, I was a public school teacher and administrator in 4 states and West Germany. I was a military wife. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and the wife of a retired Army lieutenant colonel.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Dave Bitnick, take a few moments and introduce yourself.
Good evening, Mr. Varner. My name is David Bitnick. I am the school board representative for Sleepy Hollow Borough. I was elected in 2014, and I have served 5 years and 9 months. And I'm excited to be a part of the Suffolk City School Board. Born and raised in Pennsylvania, settled here in this area after getting out of the United States Army in 1974. I worked for Norfolk Public Schools for 24 years, Newport News Public Schools for 5 years, and my last 7 years of my career, I worked for Suffolk Public Schools at Nesman River High School, and retired in 2010, and came back as a school board member in 2014. I've been married for 48 years to my wife, Doris. We have no children. It's just the two of us, and we're surviving the COVID-19 together.
Okay. It's always better together, like the song says. Mr. Hilton, Andy Hilton, introduce yourself, sir.
Guys, thank you for having me on. It's great to be here and great to talk to you guys. I'm Andy Hilton, running for Suffolk School Board in the Nansemond Borough. I'm a lifelong resident of the Hampton Roads area, proud product of Portsmouth Public Schools, and a graduate of IC Norcom. I went on to get my bachelor's degree from the University of Memphis, then came back here to live in Portsmouth, in Suffolk, and in Norfolk over the years. My kids went to Norfolk Public Schools and was proud to have them there. My mother was an educator in the city of Portsmouth, so that's how I was raised in those Portsmouth Public Schools. I worked at Wavy and Fox as my last corporate gig as their national sales manager. A little more than 10 years ago, decided to start my own business. That's Hilton Multimedia. I do marketing and advertising consulting, and also run a business called Recruit 757 that focuses on helping young student athletes, helping those high school athletes get college scholarships. We want them to leverage their athletic ability into college scholarships and get off to a great start in life. I'll also add that my website is voteandyhilton.com, and I look forward to speaking to all of you guys this evening.
Excellent. So let's get right into some interesting questions. So we have Mary Addison, who's a consultant. Her firm is MJ Addison and Associates?
LLC.
Oh, LLC, right. Mary MJ Addison, LLC. She's a consultant that works with the Hampton Roads Black Caucus, and she's going to ask our questions. In a few minutes, we're going to have a gentleman, Conrad Chesviner, who's going to pop in. He'll be our official timekeeper. But until he pops in, just try to round your questions in at around a minute, maybe a minute, 30 seconds. But the next voice you hear will be that of the beautiful Mary Addison.
Thank you, Seiko. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with our questions. I will address the question to each and every one of you, and we'll start with Dr. Buck. The question is, there's a talent drain in this region. High school graduates leave the area to attend colleges and universities, but often they do not return home. They move on to major economic city centers like Charlotte, Atlanta, and Houston, where there's better opportunities. How can the school board promote cutting-edge economic partnerships and enhance the attractiveness of this region to employers so that the former students will see this region as a viable place to return after college graduation?
Well, I think that, first of all, there is a drain of those students who may be here. I would agree with that point, but since I am a retired college professor and there are multiple colleges and universities in this area, while we may lose some who live here, we gain plenty who don't live here, who aren't from here, so they do come back to the area. Many of the students are attracted to Charlotte. My daughter and her husband live in Charlotte. They are attracted to those areas for multiple reasons. One of my doctoral students at Virginia State did a study about why students leave the area. There are a lot of reasons, and not necessarily just the businesses or job opportunities, but there are ancillary things that keep them in an area, the social life in the area, the churches, the other community pieces that cause a whole person to come together. So there are other factors that influence those, but I'll tell you what Suffolk does. One of the things that we do in Suffolk Public Schools as we work with our community partners is work with those partners with internships and other things that will interest those students and make them aware of the job possibilities that are in the area. We have business partners in the area, community partners in the area who work with students while they're still in school. As a matter of fact, our students rack up over 100,000 volunteer hours every year. So they're aware of some of those hours, some of those opportunities that are there in that they volunteer in various venues. And we have partnerships for internships for students while they are in high school. So making them aware of the things that are available while they are in high school, working with those business and partnerships, help make them aware of what's available. A lot of that has to do with the fact that they don't know what's available in the area. When they find out what opportunities are available, sometimes it changes their mind. And many of the students who do leave return. They may go away for a while, but they may return after a while to take advantage of the many opportunities in the area.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hilton, your response.
Well, I think one of the things that may come into play, we may see less of an issue just simply because remote work is going to become more of a factor. As we've seen with coronavirus, we've seen a lot of people continue their work virtually, just as schools continue virtually. So it's going to be interesting to see how technology and work of the future has people moving about the country. It would be nice for people, considering that our cost of living is lower, not as low as Atlanta, but certainly lower than DC, certainly lower than New York, certainly lower than a lot of other areas. Our area could actually be more attractive in the future and not less attractive as the question is posed. One of the things that we have to remember with our area is that we have, as a region, over decades and decades, sort of cast our lot with the military, with government employment, with shipping, transportation, tourism, shipbuilding. There's a lot of things that we do well, and a lot of reasons why people would move to the area and why people would stay with the area once they graduate here. So to echo what Ms. Dr. Brooks Buck had mentioned, I think that VOTEC, that career planning, that a lot of those things that are already in place could be further implemented, could be grown on, so that when our young people want opportunities, need opportunities, we need to start helping them pick a path, and it needs to start earlier. They need to be made aware of these opportunities as early as 8th grade, so that they know, if you're college bound, let's work on getting you to college. If you're not college bound, there's still plenty of opportunities, because what I want to see is our young people graduate from high school with better than minimum wage skills. That could be trades, that could be cosmetology, nursing, cybersecurity. Many of these things are offered by the College and Career Academy at Pruden, but that currently is underutilized. What I'd like to see is more of those opportunities and have them even spread across the city so that they're more widely available and available earlier for our young people.
Thank you. Mr. Bitnick.
Yes, thank you, Mary. While I worked in Suffolk, I was the senior guidance counselor at Nazarene River High School. And I had an opportunity to work with those students and identify what their plans were after they graduated. Suffolk does have a 6-year plan that is formulated while the students are in middle school. That plan is adjusted throughout the years. And hopefully by the time our kids become seniors in high school, they have a solidified plan for what they're going to do afterwards. Our students need to take advantage of the opportunities that are available. Mr. Hilton mentioned the College and Career Academy at Pruden. And we have over 18 programs at the CCAP, and our students need to learn to take advantage of those programs so that every student has a backup plan and a backup skill. As a guidance counselor, I would encourage kids, because many of our juniors and seniors who are eligible to go to CCAP are able to fit it in their schedule, but because of part-time jobs and commitments at home, they tend to want to get out of school as early as possible. I hope that our students are identifying the options that they have and will continue to come back home. Many of them have settled in this area, and they have seen the benefits that not only Suffolk, but the whole Hampton Roads community has for them. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. We want to thank our great candidates. Our president of the Hampton Roads Black Caucus says, "Good evening, candidates." And he says we need great school board members working for our students. So we concur. Now, to bring some brevity to our answers, we're going to bring in our timekeeper. That's Mr. LL Coolrad. So he has some times. And so what will happen is when you have 30 seconds remaining, he'll hold up this sign. When you have 15 seconds remaining, he'll hold up this sign. And when it's time to shut up, he'll hold up that sign. Yeah, cut it. So we'll go with a minute per answer from this point on. Okay? All right. So, Lady Addison.
Okay. On to our next question. All right. So, when the COVID-19 pandemic passes and the world opens up again, how would you propose safely reopening schools in a way that will be powered by the physical, mental, and emotional health and well-being of every child and teacher? Let's start with Mr. Hilton.
Well, certainly I'll start by saying that our schools must be safe. The health and well-being of our students, our teachers, our staff, our administrators, and even our parents has to be of the utmost importance. That being said, we're going to have a lot bigger things or a lot more than just health to take care of when schools return full time. We know that children have gotten out of the routine of schoolwork, have perhaps developed some bad habits. That might be sleeping in, that might be just being used to doing their schoolwork in their pajamas. So I think you're going to see a need for more guidance. Perhaps even social workers would be a huge benefit if they're available for our students, for our parents, as well as our staff. And the other thing to keep in mind is that over this pandemic, resources have varied greatly, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that further. We have to take that into account because some people have dealt with this much more easily than others. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks Buck. I'm sorry, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do it myself or did you? I'm not muted myself.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay. One of the things that I believe we need to make sure we take advantage of is making the public aware of the safety things, the safety initiatives, because even after COVID-19, I believe that the picture of schools, the face of schools will change. We need to be aware of safety. We need to be aware of the security of students, counseling for students, and making social skills and some of the other things that we've neglected simply by virtue of the fact that we're dealing with COVID-19, we're going to have to take care of. But the other thing that we're going to need to do as school board members is more aggressively look to our state, local, and federal legislators for some fiscal support, for some financial support, so that we can make sure the classrooms and those facilities that we must use are the appropriate facilities for the children to be educated in, for teachers to be educated in. They must feel comfortable, and the public must feel comfortable with the atmosphere as well as the educational setting. Thank you. I saw the ensign.
Thank you. Mr. Bitnick.
Yes, thank you very much. First thing is, we're all interested in getting our students back to school in the buildings, face to face, as soon as it is safe and healthy for the students to do so. I've identified 3 groups that I would like to see if we're going to phase back in our students. First is our pre-K through grade 3 students. They're struggling right now. A lot of them don't have the computer skills necessary to do virtual learning, and relying on their parents to assist in many ways. The second thing is I'd like to see all of our special needs students be able to come back so that all the elements of their individualized education plan and their 504 plans can be implemented. Right now, a lot of the resources. I'm sorry, I'm finished. That goes quick.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question. How would you, you kind of talked, you all touched on this a little bit, but can you go in a little bit more detail as to how you would support economically disadvantaged families and children with disabilities in procuring the necessary resources in education, especially during this time of COVID-19? And we can continue with you, Mr. Bitnick.
Thank you. Our children can't learn if we don't supply them with what they need. And fortunately here in Suffolk, we're providing 2 meals a day for every student that's delivered to a stop near their home. Because if our students don't have the correct nutritional, they're not going to be able to be successful. Next, we need to make sure that we are providing them the tools that they need. And right now, every student in Suffolk has a Chromebook, and we provide hotspots to those families that need them. Additionally, fortunately, we live in a community where many of the students' school supplies have been supplied to them through the community groups. We are fortunate to have many resource centers in the community, organizations and the churches that are providing safe areas for students to work.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks Buck.
One of the things that Suffolk Public Schools committed to do from the beginning was to make sure, as Mr. Bitnick indicated, that our students had the materials that they needed to have at home, even when we had to close and get packets. We made sure that those elementary kids before computers had the materials that they needed to have to work. We also made sure that they had food during the summer as well. We used our employees to do that. We kept people employed. That was one of the things our board, Mr. Bitnick and I are incumbents, but our board committed to keeping people employed and not trying to use the state system, the unemployment insurance and whatever else people told us was available as a resource. We kept them employed because we didn't want our employees using those services or being stuck out there. So we wanted to make sure that we had those things available. And so I think that's one of the things that we did. But we also made sure that homeless children were taken care of. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton.
I might be able to do it even quicker. We need to work harder on connecting our resources, connecting resources in general with the people that need them. Of course, the pandemic has illustrated there's a lot of gaps in service, and Suffolk Public Schools is not in a unique position here. we need to work on those gaps. And I think we have seen where Suffolk has some issues is most specifically with cell phone service and with broadband coverage. There are parts of the city that don't have either one. We used to see electricity as a necessity, or before electricity has become a necessity, plumbing, running water has become a necessity. It's gotten to the day and age where broadband and cell phone coverage is a necessity. We need to better address those issues.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks Buck, would you like to respond to those gaps that Mr. Hilton was talking about?
Well, first of all, as a school board, we aren't a taxing agency, so we can't provide the gaps. That's the city council's piece. We are funded. We aren't a taxing agency, so we get funds from the city. The city would be responsible for providing broadband, but I can tell you this. I can respond by saying, as an advocate for schools, I go to the federal government and the state government, not just our community, to get funds for us and also to fight for E-rate. E-rate would allow us to get reduced costs for those services for wiring and for the internet. I'm done. I see my ensign. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. Black students in the U.S. are subject to disciplinary actions at rates much higher than their white counterparts. Those disciplinary actions put students at risk for negative life outcomes, including involvement in the criminal justice systems. Federal data and research demonstrate that the disciplinary gap between Black and white students across 5 types of disciplinary actions is associated with county-level rates of racial bias. My question is, what policies would you propose to target racial disparities in education and psychological bias? We could start with Dr. Brooks Buck.
One of the things that interest me, and I've studied this over the years, it's not just the policy, because all school systems have a policy in place. It's who implements the policy. Just as in the country, we have laws about discrimination, and we've seen with the law how it operates just most recently with some cases that had different outcomes. So is the case with policies in school systems. It's who implements the policies that makes the difference in which children get the most severe disciplinary actions and which children don't, and how they get them, and for how long they get them, and the outcomes that we face that you've described. So not only just the policy, but how the policy is implemented, who implements the policy, and how we can work to get rid of the kind of implicit bias that operates when students are dealing with adults who implement these policies. So the key is looking at who's doing the implementing of the policy.
Thank you. Mr. Bitnick?
Yes. This fall during pre-service, our superintendent, Dr. Gordon, brought Soretta Hammond to the author of Cultural Responsive Teaching in the Brain to do professional development with our instructional staff. I believe that through culturally responsive instruction, our teachers can better meet the needs of a diverse student population. I also believe that very strongly that teachers have a responsibility to get to know their students and get to know what makes them tick and what sets them off, and so that the teachers can maybe be able to intervene before a student may get to the point where they're going to be get targeted because of racial disparities. Armed with the knowledge, our teachers can intervene if they see one of the students getting ready to go off, and maybe send them to a place where they feel safe and have a space to calm down.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton?
I see some of this as being potentially related to the previous question, and that is resources first can be an issue. We need to have our teachers and staff aware of and be able to use all the resources that are available to them, and have the students also know the resources that are available to them. One of the things I do is I work with a Christian men's group, and I've discussed prison ministry with them. And one of the things they made it very clear to me is that there's essentially 3 ways to minister, and that is while people are incarcerated, after they're incarcerated, and before they're incarcerated. And of course, the most effective ministry is before incarceration. The same would go to address behavioral issues and application of discipline issues, and that is address it before it becomes an issue. One of the things I do with work with student athletes, I have to focus on outcomes with them. Every one of them measures success differently, and we have to invest on the personal level and invest in the success of our students in order to effectively deliver results for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks-Buck, would you like to have a response to that?
I would say so. I think that not only do we need that, but we need to look at, Mr. Bitnick mentioned the training in culturally responsive teaching. If we can look at training persons, if we can look though at before we hire people in the interview process, in the evaluating process, Richmond had an interesting idea looking at people, evaluating people in the interview process, giving them assessments that look at bias before you begin. So before getting those people in to deal with the children, as Mr. Hilton just mentioned, handling the problem before it begins, and that dealing with the fact that the bias does exist.
Mr. Hilton, would you like to respond?
I think it's. I think we've covered it aptly. Again, I think it's proactivity that's the key in this case.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. We will move on to the next question. Improving race relations is central to the work of each community. Cities and regions could do more to promote racial equity. What policies would you implement to address racial inequities within your community? We'll start with Mr. Bitnick.
Thank you. The Urban Wire, the blog of the Urban Institute, in a post entitled How We Should Talk About Racial Disparities, stated it requires reconsidering our values, turning them into action, and investing in the assets and leadership of communities of color. These 3 items are the means that our community needs to address racial inequalities. I was raised by a single mom in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was taught to be very accepting of others. My friends were multiracial, and that was just how life was. When I started teaching in Norfolk, Virginia. In 1974, my first school was in Lambert's Point, and my classes were always mixed races. My entire 36 years in education, the schools I worked with were always mixed race. They reinforced the values with which I was raised.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton?
My policy includes greater access to vocational and technical education, as I mentioned earlier. What I want to see is our people, our staff, our teachers, our administrators engaging young people. Yes, that happens. It just needs to happen more. We need to get them to invest in their own success and have them understand that there's an avenue for everyone to succeed. So that means increasing VOTEC and college prep offerings and starting earlier. The other thing that I am key on is increasing public and private partnerships. It was mentioned earlier that some of those things exist. We need to simply do more. We have the opportunity to create partnerships that go well beyond what we already have in place. Newport News Shipbuilding has some great opportunities. There's some great opportunities with trades. We just need to seek out those opportunities and implement them. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks-Buck?
One of the things that I believe is it has hampered race relations over the years, and I've been around long enough to look at some of the cycles that have occurred over the years, is that people aren't talking about things that are problems, and they aren't talking about them because they don't want to take the actions necessary when they identify problems. If we would have conversations about what the problems really are, if we look at issues and not be intimidated by those issues, if we felt comfortable dealing with issues, I believe that we could at least make a step forward. If we had conversations in our communities. I live in one of the rare communities, I believe, in Suffolk, in northern Suffolk, because they're newer communities, so they're not really separated that much by race. Our neighborhoods are fairly well desegregated, and so our neighbors all look different for the most part. So I think having some conversations, real conversations, not antagonistic conversations, but real conversations around racial equities and inequities are a way to start.
Okay. Mr. Hilton, would you like to respond?
I think that's spot on. And I think one of the things that needs to be addressed that hasn't been yet is that the city of Suffolk has had issues with segregation in the past, and Suffolk schools and the city of Suffolk is dealing with that. We need to accelerate how that's dealt with so that segregation in our schools is no longer an issue.
Okay. Did you have anything else to say on that, Dr. Brooks?
Well, we are in a unique position now in Suffolk Public Schools in that we're the rare school system, and it's rare for Virginia. We are still under court order. Now, it's beneficial in that because we are still under court order, unlike Norfolk, and I'm from Norfolk actually originally. I did my dissertation on the resegregation of Norfolk Public Schools. Norfolk is out from under the court order, the original court order from Brown. However, it's resegregated. Suffolk is still under court order, so we work very hard to make sure and to watch those issues. And I think it's been beneficial that the courts are still having some oversight in Suffolk, because it means that we have to continue to work hard because the eyes are on us. So we've worked very hard on desegregation, and we still are. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we're going to move on to the next question. In order to create a culture of diversity and inclusion within the school systems, which we talked a little bit about this, what initiative would you implement to promote opportunities among your administrative and instructional staff? Let's start with Mr. Bitnick.
Yes. Creating a culture of diversity and inclusion within the school system starts at the top. One of the most important things a school board can do is select a superintendent when the position is vacant. And last summer, as we searched for our new superintendent, I think it was important that we looked for an individual that we knew would be able to promote opportunities among our administration and our instructional staff. It was very important to us as we interviewed the 7 candidates that we had narrowed our choices to. And it was very important that we looked at the individual and how they would be able to do that. Ultimately, choice was made for Dr. John Gordon III, and he alone has been able to establish the initiatives to implement and promote opportunities for our staff.
Thank you. Mr. Hilton?
We're already competing with some of the biggest cities. We are competing with the biggest cities in the area, that being Chesapeake and Virginia Beach, trying to draw the best and the brightest teachers and administrators. And that has become a barrier. Currently, Suffolk can't match and doesn't match what those school systems offer. I think one of the best ways to compete with them first is, of course, offering better pay for teachers. That would help quite a bit, but it's also work environment. We need to focus on improving the work environment in Suffolk Public Schools and making Suffolk Public Schools the best they possibly can be.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks-Buck?
Disagree in that I believe, first of all, we did indeed, as Mr. Bitnick said, look very hard for a superintendent, a leader who brought us a leader in cultural competence. I met him, actually, 2 of us met him as we attended a workshop he conducted for the state on cultural competence. So looking at the issue of inclusion, looking at the issue of diversity, he does the workshops on. We brought a leader in the field. He's brought other people there. We also looked at the fact that our leader before was interested in the topic and took us through some workshops before he retired and moved on to be a college professor. So we've been looking at this issue for a while. And again, we're under court order, so we continue to work in that area because this is something that's important to us and it's important for us. Pay is critical, of course. We want to pay our teachers, but working conditions make a difference. And Suffolk has some outstanding programs. Our students got $25 million in scholarships before COVID. And for our 3 high schools and the number of students we had, under 1,000 who graduated, that's a lot of money. So it shows the products we're putting out there. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. We got one more question. I was waiting for Seiko, but since he's not going to come, I'll ask one more question. Okay. What is your personal philosophy of education? And why is it critical for the city to ensure that collectively its citizens benefit from quality, holistic K through 12 educational experiences? Mr. Bitnick, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I believe the most important things our schools need to do is prepare our students to be involved, active citizens in their communities upon graduation. Teaching our kids the values of our community, making sure our students are aware of the needs of our community, allowing them the opportunity to come back and contribute to our community. In the high schools today, our government classes are actively preparing our students to be part of the electorate, for some for this election and some for upcoming elections. And our students need to be made aware of what is important to look at and what the values are to be considered. And to me, that's the most important thing we can do as educators.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bitnick? Mr. Hilton, sorry about that. I had Bitnick on the brain.
No, that's okay. Being the child of an educator, I was raised in Portsmouth public schools, and I certainly see the value of a public school education. I sent my kids to public schools. The reason why I value public schools is because I think it offers a real world experience. You're experiencing folks from all backgrounds, folks from all interests, folks of all economic levels. That's important. That's real life. And that's what public schools bring to the experience. As far as our offerings, I think it's best as a public servant and as a representative that all citizens feel that Suffolk Public Schools offer what's needed. And part of the job is being a good steward of the tax dollars that are given to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks-Buck.
I think that, well, first of all, a friend of mine named Robert Brown, he's deceased now, but he had a saying, education without application is useless information. I believe that an education, as Thomas Jefferson put it, should be a functional thing, and people who live in a democracy need to be literate, and they need to understand what this society is all about, how to run it, how to operate it. And living in a democracy means that you ought to be well educated and well informed. You ought to know what it is, where it is you live, and what the offerings are. And actually, when I see the things that we have to offer in Suffolk, we have dual degree programs, we have advanced placement programs, we have literacy programs, early literacy programs, artist in residence programs, from preschool to high school. We have numerous opportunities for students with disabilities, without disabilities, and all through school. So Suffolk Public Schools offers an array of options for parents. Choices here, it's much greater than in a lot of places. It's a wonderful place to live and be educated. So I think, as far as my philosophy of education, I believe that everybody in America ought to have a right to be well educated, because we can't live in the society without it. Thank you. I'm sorry, I ran over a few seconds.
Okay, so we have a question submitted from one of our viewers, and the president of HRBC, Mr. Ron Taylor. He's asking, what about the teachers' pay raises? Can you all share with us your take on that? Let's start with Mr. Bitnick.
Yes, in 2015, the school board and the city council together did a compensation and classification study. The school board at that time started in 2015 to make sure that we would bring our teachers' salaries up. Most of them out of the 14 school systems in Region 2, Suffolk ranked 11, 12, 13th in most of the salary ranges. And that year, we were able to work with City Council and we improved our pay raises. And since 2015, our teachers have received a pay raise every year. And this year, the pay raise was significant. Again, we worked to bring our teachers back up in line with those in the Region 2 school systems.
Mr. Hilton.
I certainly am an advocate for pay raises for public school teachers, as I just mentioned. One of the issues that we have in the state of Virginia is that Virginia is 32nd in the nation for teacher pay. When you add to that Suffolk is not even meeting the average for the state of Virginia, that's a huge problem. One other problem that we have is the gap between first-year teachers and veteran teachers. There just simply isn't, there aren't enough pay raises or aren't enough pay increases as someone progresses through tenure for it to be an incentive for them to stay in Suffolk. We want to not only get good teachers, we want to keep good teachers, and that would go a long way toward that.
Dr. Brooks Buck.
Actually, we do do a very good job of keeping the teachers that we have. There was a time before the study that Mr. Bitnick mentioned that we would lose teachers between year 6 and year 10. After that time, after the study, we were able to keep our teachers because even though the salaries are not what they should be, the cost of living in this area is lower. And I believe it was Mr. Hilton who mentioned that the cost of living is lower in the area. Teacher salaries are definitely not where we want them to be. And the last data I looked at, Virginia is 7th in the nation as far as education standards, student testing, student performance. But it was 35th when I looked at the U.S. News and World Report with teacher salaries. So all of that comes together to look at where we are and what we need to do. Teachers need more money, but our board has always voted and supported teacher raises. There's not one person on the board who has not supported teacher raises as best we could. And of course, we are funded not by ourselves, but by our council.
Thank you. And let's see, Mr. Bitnick has a response. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to just add a comment in reference to what Mr. Hilton was talking about. We have 34 pay steps, Mr. Hilton, and there are pay raises every year along those steps. The years 5 through 15 have the greatest pay steps so that we can keep the teachers that we've trained. And just this past year, we added 4 additional pay steps to the top of the salary scale so that we could reward our loyal teachers who have been with us the longest. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question coming in from viewer. How would you all close the educational gaps that we have? We'll start with Mr. Hilton.
Well, as it's been mentioned before, I think the key, we can pass all the policies we want. It comes down to the people, and it has to come where we are setting up our children for success, but we're also setting up our administrators, our guidance counselors, our teachers with the materials they need to close the gaps and help the kids close the gaps, because ultimately the rubber hits the road at the student level. And that's where the changes are going to happen. We need to take economics into account. We need to take background into account, but ultimately it really is a people before policy answer.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks Buck.
I think that there are ways to do that. I think that we've come together in so many instances and pulled up, made differences and made increases or decreases in the gaps, but increases in student performance. We've done it. We've pulled up. If you look at some of the data from the state, we've won awards for for making changes in the gaps in student performance. Usually we look at racial gaps, but I think Mr. Hilton alluded to one piece of it anyway. The gaps are more economic than they are racial. And people do tend to look at Black-white achievement gaps and white other race achievement gaps. But in reality, they're economic gaps if we look at the data across the board. And if we look at poverty as one of those factors that impacts all of us, some of those factors we cannot change, but we can indeed work with those children and they can improve. And it has been done. It has been done in Suffolk and it has been done in Virginia. It has been done across the country. And we work at it and we do it on a regular basis. The data speak and they show that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bitnick?
Yes, to follow up on what Dr. Brooks just said, Suffolk has done an outstanding job in closing the achievement gaps of our students from school to school. The important thing we need to look at is racial equity. And in the schools who have the students with the lower socioeconomic levels, it is important to make sure that we are providing additional resources. And under the leadership of our previous superintendent and Dr. Gordon, we are actively competing for grants so that our schools, where the most need is, we are able to supply that need. And where the most resources are needed, we're able to supply those and give them the additional staff that they need as well.
Thank you. Okay, so each one of you will have another minute to just kind of give the voters explain to the voters why they should vote for you and not for someone else. Let's start with Mr. Hilton.
I'd be happy to answer that question. First of all, I'm a candidate of change. There have been some concerns on the school board with the getting along, the working together, and I don't bring specific fault to the candidate that I'm running against, the incumbent. There's just a time for change and there's time for good and new input on the board. I come from a business background. I come from a love of education and a love of community. I approach the job as a community servant and as a good steward of the tax dollars of the Nansemond Borough. I'm here to serve the citizens and see Suffolk Public Schools be the best they can be.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks Buck?
I am the incumbent and I've been serving the Nansemond Borough for 7 years and 9 months. I want to see the conversation change. There needs to be a change, but there needs to be a change in the conversation. There needs to be a true discussion of what is going on in Suffolk Public Schools. We have excellent programs. Our students are doing extremely well, and we need to talk about those things. But the other thing there needs to be, and with regard to my campaign, I began this process looking at Suffolk Public Schools and looking at what was really going on in Suffolk Public Schools. I'd heard all the negative when I joined the school board years ago. And I thought, when I got on the school board and realized what was really going on, I thought, okay, we need to change the discourse. We need to rewrite the discourse and we need to change the conversation. And since then, I've made it my mission to rewrite the discourse and change the conversation. I've worked with state, local, and federal legislators to bring resources to this area, to look at legislation that impacted this area in a positive way. I've been an educator for almost 50 years now. It'll be 50 years in January, working with children from birth to graduate school. So I believe that I have the credentials, the background, the experience, and the work to do that. We are all adults on the school board, and how we talk to each other, get along, or do whatever has nothing to do with the outcomes. Our students are the focus of what we do in Suffolk, and they have demonstrated through their outcomes in scholarships, in performance, in their life's work, and so on and so forth, what they can do. Thank you. I see the inside.
Thank you. Mr. Bitnick?
Yes, I ran for the school board in 2014 in a special election because I wasn't done being an educator. I feel that serving on the school board is a very important job. It's helps drive the community in which we all live. And I hope that in the almost 6 years that I've been on the board, that people have realized that I am pretty much an independent lone wolf. Um, I I believe in what's best for the children. I work hard for those things that I think um, are important and will improve the working conditions of our teachers and the needs of our students. And I hope to be able to continue that. I'm running unopposed. So God willing, I'll be here for 4 more years.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. Now back to Seiko.
Interesting. Mr. Bitnick is running unopposed. So that speaks reams. That says that, well, I don't know what it says. I don't want to put meaning into it, but it does speak reams to me. So congratulations for running unopposed. That's an accomplishment. It really is an accomplishment. So Mr. Bitnick, we're going to say thank you and good luck in your campaign.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the opportunity you provided this evening.
Beautiful. What's interesting to me is we do have 2 competitors here. We have Dr. Judith Brooks Buck and we have Andy Hilton. So Conrad, I think I'm going to pull you off and let's do this. We've got a chance to talk about why you're the best option for people. But I don't think you really had enough time to really say why you're truly the best or why you should be the best choice. So we're going to give you both a moment and say again a little deeper why you're the best choice, because the viewers just kind of watched what both of you said and said, wow, I agree with her. I agree with him. I agree with him. I agree with her. Who do I choose? And so I like for there's some differentiation to occur. So let's do this. We're not going to put a time limit on it. Try to keep it amongst a minute, maybe 2 minutes. And hey, give your platform speech, all right? And we'll start with the incumbent. So Dr. Judith Brooks Buck, give us your platform speech, all right?
My platform speech is this. First of all, the work I've done speaks for me. I've worked very hard for the school system over the years. The students have been successful. My parents have been pleased with the work that I've done with the schools. I am an educator. I've been an educator. I didn't say very much about my background. My first degree is special education and psychology. The second one is school administration and supervision. And the first is from Bitnick College for Women in Greensboro, North Carolina. The second is a master's degree in administration and supervision with emphasis in special education from the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And my PhD is in educational policy studies from the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. I've worked very hard with the local officials to continue the conversation about what our schools actually do, because I realized when I got on the school board that there were people who did not understand what schools actually do and what the outcomes were, how to measure the outcomes for students and what to look at. People can look at grown people's conversations and what they like and what they don't like and who they don't like and so on and so forth. That's very minor. It's irrelevant. But we look at outcomes. We look at student performance. We look at the fact that our students go anywhere from the Air Force Academy to the first year I was on the school board, the salutatorian at Kings Fork High School went to Yale. You don't get into those institutions if you come from a place where you've learned absolutely nothing. We looked at the programs that people have. We looked at how to get resources for the school system. So working together with the mayor and with city council, even though there are some members of city council who have their own sets of issues, those are issues. The truth is we've worked very carefully over the years, and we have, as Mr. Bitnick mentioned, since 2015, since our study, been able to get salary increases and some other things that we wanted to get. We built 3 new schools in the city. we've been able to get some other things done. And again, I've worked with the state, and I've even worked with our congressmen and our 2 state senators to get some things done, and worked with state folks to get some legislation passed so that we can get some things for our school and get some policies, because, you know, our state, because we live in Virginia, our state actually sets some policies for our schools, and it's not done on this level. It's not done with us, but just because of the structure of schools in Virginia. So there are a lot of things that we can do as advocates of the school board, not day-to-day things where we run the schools ourselves as school board members, but governance kinds of things that school board members actually ought to be doing.
Okay, Mr. Hilton, with such a great accomplishment, why should people choose you?
Well, with Dr. Brooks Buck, her reputation speaks for itself. I would dare say my reputation speaks for itself as well. I have a 30-year career in business here locally. I have worked in the schools for the last 10 years. I chose to start my own business that works with student athletes, essentially high school students, who are trying to improve themselves, who are trying to get to the next level, to get to college, to be a lifetime success. And the one thing that comes with that is that I'm in the schools not only in Suffolk, but I go to the schools from Virginia Beach to Williamsburg and actually statewide. I do work statewide. I see what Loudoun County schools look like, for instance. I see what Richmond schools look like. I've been in the Portsmouth schools, the Norfolk schools, all the schools of the area from Williamsburg, James City County, York County to Virginia Beach, and can tell you a lot about how they function. And as much success as Suffolk has seen, there's still better success to come. But what we need to do is have a better and bigger investment in our schools and aspire to better. One of the things I know about the Nansemond Borough is it is the growth engine of Suffolk. That being said, there's more growth coming. There's more tax dollars that are going to be generated from the Nansemond Borough, and the Nansemond Borough needs a representative who's going to stand up and say that those tax dollars need to come more to the borough. I'm representing the city of Suffolk as a whole, but Nansemond Borough has 2 schools. There was an expansion plan for Northern Shores Elementary that got scrapped that still needs to happen. Fred Cherry Middle School was built and expanded before it was finished to have 800 students. That school is full. Northern Shores is full. Nansemond River High School is full. This borough needs a 4th high school, and to this point, that high school has been put on the back end of the 10-year plan several times and could be put on the back end of the 10-year plan again so that it wouldn't be built until 2030. It needs to be planned ASAP, and it needs to happen sooner than 2028 or 2030. We have to address overcrowding in the schools in the Nansemond Borough, and I feel like I'm the person to take on those responsibilities. One last thing I'll squeeze in. There are currently a board full of educators on the school board. There's obviously a reason for that, but I think there's room for a business mind on the school board, and that would bring needed diversity of thought and opinion and needed new ideas.
Okay, great responses. We want to thank Dr. Judith Brooks Buck. Thank you, Dr. Judith Brooks Buck, for participating and all that you've done for the students of Suffolk. We want to thank Andrew Hilton for deciding that he wants better for Suffolk and jumping in the race. That says a lot as well. So we want to thank both of them for their hard work, their dedication to the city of Suffolk. And now I want to bring back Miss Mary Addison and Brother Conrad. We're going to do a quick chat very quickly and say goodbye to our candidates. And Mary, before we get into the chat about what happened tonight, I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about the endorsement process. See, the candidates who appeared on the screen tonight have the possibility of receiving an endorsement from the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. Can you talk about that process?
Okay.
You're
As
good.
a consultant, I provide the questionnaire to the candidates The questions come from the members of HRBC. So you should have received an email by now, and you should have received the questionnaire. It's important that you fill out that questionnaire and return it by the stated deadline. And then I collect and compile all of those responses, and I put those in a report and give them back to the members of HRBC. And from that, they will vet those questions and they provide an endorsement accordingly. So if you want to be endorsed by HRBC, it's very important that you fill that questionnaire out and get it back in by the stated deadline. So I have received the questionnaire back from the candidates who were on the panel tonight. So I'd say thank you. If you have not, if you're listening and you have not yet had the opportunity to fill that questionnaire in, I would just ask you to please go ahead and get that back to me as soon as possible.
Right. Great. Conrad, you've acted as our timekeeper tonight, but you have a degree in politics from Old Dominion University. You're our Politico for the Beach Brothers. Are there any questions that the city of Suffolk residents should be asking themselves when they look at this debate and look at other opportunities for the candidates to, share their platforms? Are there any other questions that the residents should start asking?
I think the HRBC has touched on a lot of very important issues. Maybe they might want to address whether or not this is only because I heard this in Mr. Hilton's last response, that the Endorsement Borough is the growth borough, to which maybe other boroughs in Suffolk might want to challenge that or something like that. But this is just something I had just heard right there at the end. I would want, if I had lived in Suffolk, all parts of the city to be very strong. So it's just something to look forward to.
Good stuff. Well, once again, all the viewers, we thank you for watching. This is from the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. I'm Seiko Varner, a member of the HRBC, but importantly for tonight, I'm with Positive Vibes Consulting, and we put this online forum together. We have Mary Addison, and she has a consulting firm. I don't want to demean your consulting firm and misrepresent what it does. So give a hot second about what you do.
What I do? Okay, so I provide for HRBC, I provide their assessment and questionnaire. So I provide evaluations, questionnaires. I also provide training materials and documentation. I'm an instructional designer. So but specifically for this job, it is to help to develop questions that would be appropriate for the forms, the specific forms, to make sure that they are very well developed and defined. So we can get the information back from the candidates that the members are seeking. They want to know specific information, so the questions have to be catered to those needs. So that's pretty much it.
Beautiful. So, Conrad, if you can just tell us a little bit about the sponsor that's helped for this platform, the Beach Brothers Show, and everything that we're doing. You drive around in their sponsorship all the time. Tell us quickly about that sponsor.
My go-to driving around vehicle is a Jetta of 2017, and I got that at Southern Volkswagen in Chesapeake, Virginia, specifically 1248 South Military Highway. In order to get a good car like that, it'll take you from the Virginia Beach oceanfront all the way to Suffolk. If you'd like to go out to Suffolk to, say, the Peanut Festival or something like that one time, you will need a nice car that you can get from Southern Volkswagen in Chesapeake. Hop on in, speak to Cynthia Rawlings and Charlie Roy, and look at getting yourself a great piece of driving.
The guide is really undergoing a transformation as we focus on social and digital media in addition to our print. But our mission has never changed. It is to be an authentic recorder of news, events, information, and issues as they relate to the Black community. Your subscription today ensures the stories will be told tomorrow.
tallyandtwine.com. Yes, that's tallyandtwine.com, where you can find beautiful watches for men and for women, made here in the United States, made here in the great state of Virginia. made in Portsmouth, Virginia. That's right, made in America, made in Virginia, and made in Portsmouth. TallyandTwine.com. Great watches for the men. Look at these beautiful watches. Aren't they nice, masculine, really attractive, and these sexy watches for our beautiful ladies. TallyandTwine.com. This is my favorite watch. This is the watch I personally own. TallyandTwine.com, made in Virginia, made in America. It's time for you to get a high quality watch from Tally and. This show was brought to you by Positive Vibes Incorporated, our consulting services. We do credit fixes, we do tax resolution, we lend private money and debt consolidation. So if you need some of these services, we're waiting here for you. Credit fixes, tax resolutions, private money, and debt consolidation. Make sure you call Positive Vibes Incorporated. Take care.